My name is Harry Burton. I was the partner and negotiator in charge of several space searches and ultimate deals that Morgan Lewis did in the 1990s, culminating in 2000 and 2001. We most recently moved into an excellent site at 1111 Pennsylvania Avenue. That was really the culmination of a series of transactions that we began in 1994, approximately 1994. We needed to expand our space at 1800 M Street, where we had been since the mid-70s. And we're very happy with the space, but it was clear that we needed expansion, and down the road it was clear we were likely going to need to either move or get a lot more space in the building. But that was not on our mind in 1994. We ended up negotiating with a number of sites for the ultimate deal in 2000 and 2001 with 1111 Pennsylvania Avenue. The deal was actually culminated much earlier, but as I mentioned, it began with expansion. We ended up interviewing most of the major firms, including Craig was on that team that we interviewed. Based on the interviews and some prior experience, we went ahead with the national accounts team, and Craig basically was put in charge of our transaction. The expansion negotiations went very well. We were happy with them, and we were concluded that we were done for at least 5 or 6 years, given the fact that our lease was not terminating until about 2002. However, not long after we finished that transaction, Craig came back to us and talked to us about the market. He noted that the market was tightening a great deal. In the future, there were going to be a lot of competitors looking at similar large sites that we would have to look at, and that if we did nothing, the market would tighten in advance of our entry to the market, and all of our large competitors would have already visited the prime sites. So the bottom line, Craig said, while it appears counterintuitive to the lawyer layman in commercial real estate, it was time for us to get out and look very hard. We were not at all sure about that advice, candidly. We talked about it for quite a while, but ended up taking his advice, at least in a modest way at first. After we got into the process, it became apparent that Craig and his colleagues were right, that if we did not move with some alacrity, we would be left behind, picking up sites that had been picked over, candidly, by a number of firms, and left in a very tight market, in all likelihood, by the late 1990s. So in a series of transactions that Craig led us through, we ended up looking at approximately 19 sites throughout Washington, D.C. These were sites, of course, that other firms were looking at, firms that had expirations well in advance of ours. But because of the insight that the National Accounts team and Craig brought to us, and also because of their daily drive, we were out in the market very aggressively, and we think fairly creatively with their advice. And we ended up with an excellent deal at 1111 Pennsylvania Avenue. We moved in there ultimately to what amounted to a new building in January of 2002. That site alone was an interesting example of the insight that was brought to these series of transactions. And I say series of transactions because we also have rights in the building next door, the Evening Star building, which was part of the recommendation to us. That site, the 1111 Pennsylvania Avenue site, had been looked at by several other firms by the time that we looked at it. It had several perceived problems. The landlord, Laszlo Tauber, was a well-known developer in the area, but had not done Class A buildings, or at least many of them, in the past. The site itself had some challenges, including the fact that it was then occupied by the District of Columbia government, which had a lease on it that would have kept it out of our hands, at least at the time that we wanted to get into it. But ultimately, we were able to surmount those difficulties with the advice that we had. Really, at the bottom line, what we found with Craig, other than his amazing energy, was a combination of three things that were and are very rare in my experience. He and his colleagues have deep market knowledge about this and of course other markets, particularly the DC market. They combine that with a real strategic view of the client's needs, and they have a real attention to detail, which I think is very unusual in someone with such broad strategic view. It was a pleasure to work with Craig over those years. It was not always easy, I have to say, because Craig, in his zeal to get us the best deal, would flood me with information. It was all good information, but while I was trying to practice, Craig was also trying his best to make sure that I paid attention to the real estate deal at hand. And I can only say that after the flood of information and after I became accustomed to how much information he was putting to hand, it was ultimately very easy to winnow it down with his help and then proceed very effectively to a deal. Not every client would need all of these aspects in a deal, but there was one other aspect that I needed. Part of my career is to be a management side labor negotiator, so negotiations are not anything unusual to me. It's what I do from day to day very frequently. But working in commercial real estate, of course, is a very different venue. And Craig was able to bridge my experience and his experience very effectively in giving me advice as my partners and I went through the negotiation and the transactions as a whole. Right now, we have no further need, happily, for their services, but it was an excellent experience throughout.